Jason was new to the space colony on Earth. It wasn't his first time being in space. But this place felt different. The colony was full of aliens from all over the galaxy. Jason wasn't sure if he would ever get used to it. He had always felt like an outsider. The aliens were different, their ways strange and sometimes hard to understand. Jason had come here to find something that would give him a sense of belonging. But so far, nothing felt right. He spent most of his days walking around the busy marketplace, looking at the colorful shops and the strange, exotic goods. There were fruits from planets Jason had never even heard of, and clothes that glittered in the light. The sounds were different too, with aliens speaking in languages he didn't know, their voices blending into a strange, peaceful hum. It was in this marketplace that Jason first saw her. She stood at the edge of the crowd, her long, flowing hair catching the light in a way that made her look almost otherworldly. Jason couldn't take his eyes off her. She was like nothing he had ever seen before. Her skin was a soft shade of blue, and her eyes, bright and sharp, seemed to sparkle with a hidden knowledge. Jason had never felt such an intense pull towards someone. He had to approach her. As he walked toward her, he felt nervous. He didn't know why. He had talked to many aliens before, but something about her was different. When he reached her, she turned to face him with a calm smile. "You're new here," she said, her voice smooth and soothing, almost as if she had known him for years. Jason blinked in surprise. Yeah, I just moved in," Jason stammered, trying to hide his shock. "How did you know?" The woman smiled even wider, and Jason felt a strange warmth spread through him. She tilted her head slightly, her eyes still locked on his. "I know a lot of things," she said, her voice gentle. "Like how you feel lonely, how you've been searching for something." Jason felt his heart skip a beat. He didn't know how to respond. It was as if she could see right through him. He had been trying to hide his loneliness, but somehow this stranger knew all about it. Jason took a step back, unsure of what to do next. "I didn't mean to scare you," she said, sensing his discomfort. "I'm Laura, and you are?" "Jason," he replied, still feeling a little uneasy. "I didn't mean to stare. It's just, you seem different." Lara's smile softened, and for a moment, Jason could have sworn she looked like she was reading his mind. He quickly shook the thought away. That couldn't be possible. She was just a stranger in a strange world. But there was something about her, something that made him feel like he had known her for a long time, even though they had just met. "What brought you here?" she asked, stepping closer to him. Jason shrugged. "I don't really know. I guess I'm just trying to figure things out." Laura nodded, her eyes never leaving his. "Sometimes the journey is more important than the destination," she said, her voice low and thoughtful. "You'll find what you're looking for here. You just have to open your mind to it." Jason wasn't sure what she meant, but there was something in her words that stuck with him. The way she spoke made him feel like she understood things he couldn't even express. She knew what he needed, even if he didn't know it himself. The conversation ended quickly, but Jason couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. There was something about Laura, something that felt both familiar and mysterious at the same time. He watched her disappear into the crowd, and for the rest of the day, he couldn't stop thinking about her. That night, as Jason lay in bed, he couldn't help but replay their encounter over and over in his mind. How had she known so much about him? It was like she had read his thoughts, like she knew exactly what he was feeling. But that was impossible. No one could do that, right? The next morning, Jason found himself walking toward the marketplace again. He wasn't sure why he was going back, but something inside him told him he had to find Laura again. He didn't want to admit it, but he was eager to see her. He needed to understand what had happened, what she had said, and most of all how she had made him feel like he wasn't alone. As he wandered through the busy market, Jason finally spotted her, standing by a fruit stall. She was looking at the same strange fruit he had seen the day before. When she noticed him, she turned to face him with that same soft smile. "Back for more, Jason?" she asked, her voice playful. Jason could feel his heart racing, but he smiled. "Back? I guess so." Laura looked at him thoughtfully. You're more than you think you are, Jason. You just need to trust yourself. Jason was about to respond when something strange happened. As he thought about the fruit she was looking at, the fruit suddenly appeared in his hand. He stared at it, confused. Had he really just wished for it? How had that happened? Lara's smile grew wider. You've started to understand, she said softly. But there's more to come. Jason was speechless. What was going on? He had never felt anything like this before. But he couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was just the beginning. Jason couldn't stop thinking about what happened. With the fruit, he hadn't just imagined it, he had actually wished for it, and there it was, right in his hand. It didn't make any sense. He turned the fruit over in his palm, staring at it with confusion. Did you do that? He asked, glancing up at Lara. Lara was still looking at him, but this time her expression seemed different. It was as if she was waiting for him to understand something, like she knew exactly what was going through his mind. I didn't do anything, Jason, she replied, her voice calm and soft. But you did. You thought about it, and it became real. Jason shook his head. That can't be right. I didn't do anything. Lara smiled gently. You may not realize it, but your thoughts have more power than you think. Just pay attention, and you'll see it. Jason felt a chill run down his spine. The idea that his thoughts could turn into reality was both exciting and terrifying at the same time. He wasn't sure if he wanted to believe it, but what else could explain what had just happened? Are you saying I can do this with anything? Jason asked, his voice a little shakier now. Lara nodded. Yes, but only if you're open to it. The more you believe, the more powerful it becomes. Jason took a deep breath and glanced at the fruit again. He had thought about it for a second, and then it appeared. He focused on the fruit in his hand, wondering if it was possible to make something else happen. Maybe a glass of water, a piece of bread. But as he thought about these things, nothing happened. His thoughts were just thoughts. There was no magic behind them. Lara must have seen the frustration on his face. Don't force it, she said. You have to let it happen naturally. Focus on something. Jason's decision to stop using his powers wasn't easy, but every day it felt more and more right. It had been a few weeks since he had made the choice to live a life without shortcuts. The world around him felt more real now, even if it was messy and unpredictable. But for the first time in a long while, Jason felt like he was truly living. He started noticing the small things, the way the sun felt warm on his face, the sound of birds singing in the morning, the smell of fresh coffee brewing. These were the things he had taken for granted before, when his powers had made everything feel so artificial. Now, he could appreciate these moments in a way he never had. Jason had also started to focus more on building his life from the ground up. He had begun working at a local spaceport, repairing ships. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave him a sense of purpose. There were days when the work was difficult, and things didn't always go according to plan, but that was what made it rewarding. He was learning, growing, and earning everything he had, not by wishing for it, but by putting in the effort. One afternoon, while Jason was fixing a ship's engine, he found himself thinking about Lara. She had been right. The more he worked, the more he appreciated the small victories. She had told him that it wasn't about control or power, it was about making the right choices and working towards something real. Jason hadn't seen Lara in a while. After their last conversation, they had both agreed to take some time apart. She had her own path to follow, and Jason needed to focus on his. But deep down, he felt grateful to her. Without her guidance, he wasn't sure if he would have made the decision to stop using his powers. She had helped him see what really mattered. Later that day, as he was finishing up for the day, he walked outside and saw Lara sitting on a bench. Near the port, she was waiting for him, a calm smile on her face. It had been some time since they had spoken, and Jason was surprised to see her, but also glad. Hey, Jason said as he walked up to her, wiping his hands on a cloth. Hi, Jason. Lara replied. How have you been? Jason smiled. I've been good, really good, actually. I've been keeping busy. Working at the spaceport. It's hard work, but it feels right. I'm learning a lot. Lara nodded. her expression pleased. I'm glad to hear that. You're doing well. Jason hesitated for a moment. You were right, about the power. I was so focused on controlling everything, I forgot what it meant to actually live. Lara's smile grew warmer. I knew you'd figure it out, sometimes. The hardest lesson is the one where you learn to let go. Jason looked out at the spaceport, his thoughts drifting. I don't know if I'll ever stop thinking about the power. It's a part of me now, but I don't need it to be happy. I don't need it to feel alive. You've learned something important, Lara said softly. True power isn't in why. You can create it in what you choose to do with what you have. Jason nodded, feeling a deep sense of peace. He knew that life wasn't going to be perfect. There would still be challenges ahead, but now he was ready for them. He wasn't relying on anything outside of himself to make his life better. He was the one who had to make the changes, step by step. The next few weeks passed by quickly. Jason's life had settled into a rhythm. He worked hard at the spaceport, made new friends, and enjoyed the simple pleasures of life. He started picking up new skills, fixing ships, and learning how to fly small spacecrafts. He didn't need to be the best at everything, but he enjoyed the progress he made, and that, in itself, was enough. One day, after a long day of work, Jason walked to a cafe near the spaceport to grab a drink. As he entered, he saw a woman sitting at a table, reading a book. For a moment, he thought he saw a familiar face, and when she looked up, Jason realized it was Lara. She smiled warmly when she saw him. You look different, Jason, she said, her eyes bright with approval. Jason sat down across from her, feeling a sense of calm wash over him. I feel different, he said, smiling. I've been thinking about everything, about the power, about what I want out of life, and I've realized that I'm finally on the right track. I'm not perfect, but that's okay, Lara nodded. That's exactly it, Jason. It's not about being perfect. It's about being true to yourself, making the choices that align with who you really are. Jason thought about all the work he had put into his life, all the small victories he had experienced. He had come a long way from the person who was obsessed with controlling the world around him. He hadn't done it alone, and he didn't have all the answers, but he was learning, and that was enough. I think I'm starting to understand what you meant, Jason said. It's about living the way I choose, even if things aren't perfect, the imperfections, the mistakes, that's what makes it real. And that's what I want, Lara smiled, her eyes filled with pride. You've come a long way, Jason. I'm proud of you. Jason smiled back. Thank you, Lara. I couldn't have done it without you. But now, I'm ready to keep going on my own. I'm ready for whatever comes next. As Jason sat there with Lara, he realized that his life had changed in ways he hadn't expected. He wasn't who he had been before, and he wasn't sure exactly who he would become. But he knew that whatever happened, he would face it with confidence, with the knowledge that the choices he made were his own. And that, Jason thought, was the true power you truly want. Something that matters to you? Jason nodded slowly, still unsure about everything. Was it really that simple? He looked around, trying to find something small and simple to focus on. He spotted a small flower nearby, growing in a pot on a table. He thought about how nice it would be to have that flower in his hand. Without thinking, he reached out, and, to his surprise, the flower moved as if drawn to his hand. It gently lifted from the pot and floated toward him until he was holding it in his palm. Jason's mouth dropped open as he looked at the delicate petals and bright colors of the flower. How did? Jason couldn't finish the question. His heart was racing now. Lara's smile grew wider, and there was a glimmer of something else in her eyes. You're learning, Jason. You've just begun to realize what you're capable of. Jason felt a wave of excitement mixed with confusion. He had no idea how this was happening, but it was real. He was making things happen with his thoughts, and it was both amazing and frightening. But then, as quickly as it had appeared, the flower began to fade, as if it was no longer there. Jason blinked, and in a blink, the flower was gone, leaving nothing in his hand but air. What happened? He asked, looking at Lara. It faded because you didn't believe in it enough, she explained. The more you doubt, the weaker the power becomes. Trust in yourself, and you'll see it last longer. Jason was trying to process everything. Could he really make anything appear just by thinking about it? How far did this power go? And why had Lara been so calm about it all? She seemed to know exactly what was happening, and it made him feel like he was missing something important. Lara seemed to notice his confusion. Jason, you're just scratching the surface. There's so much more, but you have to let go of your fear. Only then can you truly understand. Jason shook his head. I don't know if I can. This feels so unnatural. Lara took a step closer. It's not unnatural. It's just part of who you are. Part of who we all are. The only thing standing in your way is your fear. Once you learn to trust yourself, you'll see that this power is just the beginning. Jason didn't know how to respond to that. Part of him wanted to believe her, to trust that this was real and that he could do amazing things. But the other part of him couldn't shake the feeling that he was losing control. If he could make things happen with his thoughts, where would it all stop? Could he accidentally create something dangerous? What if he made a mistake? He looked at Lara, his mind racing. What if I can't control it? Lara's gaze softened, and she gently placed a hand on his shoulder. It's not about control, Jason. It's about understanding. Once you understand your power, it won't be a burden. You'll know when to use it and when to let things unfold on their own. Jason wasn't sure he believed that, but there was something about the way Lara spoke that made him feel like she was telling the truth. Maybe, just maybe, he could learn to control this strange ability. He took a deep breath and looked around. He thought about his life, his loneliness, his struggles. What if this power could help him feel like he belonged? What if it could give him a way to connect with the world in a way he never had before? He looked back at Lara, his determination growing. I want to try. I want to understand it. Lara smiled warmly. Good, you're on the right path, Jason. Let's see how far you can go. Jason didn't know what was ahead, but for the first time in a long while, he felt like he had a chance. He was going to explore this power, and nothing was going to stop him. Jason was still trying to come to terms with what had happened. It was one thing to see things happen around him, but it was another to realize that he could control them. His thoughts had actual power, and it scared him. The flower had disappeared so quickly. It was as if it had never been there, but Jason could still feel the sensation of holding it in his hand. He couldn't stop thinking about it. What if he could create something bigger? What if he accidentally caused something terrible? Lara seemed to notice his hesitation, her sharp eyes watching him closely. It's okay, Jason, she said softly. You're not alone in this. Many people who have this power feel unsure at first. But the key is trust. Trust in yourself, and the rest will follow. Jason took a deep breath and looked at Lara. He wanted to believe her, but a small voice inside him kept asking, what if it goes wrong? Lara, sensing his doubt, stepped closer. I know it's hard, but think of this power as part of you. It's not something you need to control like an object. It's part of your mind. The more you understand yourself, the easier it will be to use. Jason nodded slowly. He wanted to understand. He needed to understand. But the fear still lingered. What if he wasn't ready? What if he couldn't handle it? Lara smiled, as if reading his thoughts. You're ready, Jason. The fact that you're questioning it means you're already starting to think in the right way. You just have to let go of the fear. Jason tried to relax. He had spent his life wondering if he'd ever be able to do something special, if he had a purpose. Now, it seemed like the universe had handed him something extraordinary. But with that gift came a weight that Jason wasn't sure he could carry. How do I make it stay? Jason asked. The flower, it vanished so quickly. Lara looked at him, her eyes sparkling with understanding. It's all about focus. When you focus on something deeply and you truly believe in it, it stays. The doubt, it fades things away. Jason thought about that. Focus, belief, it sounded simple enough, but it wasn't. He thought about how many times in his life he had doubted himself. How many times he had given up on something because he wasn't sure it was possible. But this was different. This was real. He couldn't keep doubting himself. or nothing would ever work. He closed his eyes and focused on the feeling of the flower. In his hand, he imagined the soft petals, the bright colors, the way it had felt, and then, slowly, he imagined the flower returning to his palm. At first, nothing happened. Jason opened his eyes and looked at his empty hand. He tried again, this time imagining the flower even more clearly in his mind. He thought about every little detail, the texture, the scent, the colors. He wanted it to come back. He needed it to dot, and then, just as his frustration was about to peak, he felt something shift. A small, soft weight appeared in his hand. He looked down, and there it was, the flower. The same flower, bright, soft, and real. Jason gasped. He had done it. He had made the flower appear again. The joy that filled him was overwhelming. He had done something he had never thought possible. He wasn't sure how, but it didn't matter. It had worked. Laura was watching him, her expression proud but calm. "Well done, Jason," she said. "You started to see the truth." Jason grinned, feeling a sense of triumph. But the joy was quickly replaced with a new kind of fear. What happens now? Can I keep doing this? What if I start making more bigger things? Lara's smile softened. It's all about balance. You'll learn how to use it wisely. The more you practice, the better you'll get. But remember, it's not about creating something just because you can. It's about understanding why you want it. Jason nodded, trying to take it all in. "I don't want to get out of control," he said quietly. "What if I start creating things I shouldn't?" Lara's gaze turned serious. "That's a risk you'll have to face, but I trust you. As long as you remember what matters, your heart, your intentions, you'll be fine." Jason thought about that. He didn't want to hurt anyone. He didn't want to hurt himself. But could he really trust his own judgment? Could he trust himself enough to handle this power without it consuming him? Laura stepped back, her eyes thoughtful. "You're asking all the right questions. That's what's important. You have the power to create, Jason, but only you can decide what to do with it. And only you can decide if it will be used for good or bad." Jason didn't know what the future held. He didn't know what kind of person he would be with this power, but for the first time, he felt like he could truly make a difference. He wasn't sure how or where to start, but he knew one thing for sure. He had to be careful. With great power, there had to be great responsibility. He looked at the flower again, holding it in his hand. It was a small thing, but it was his, and that was enough for now. "I'll try," he said, his voice firm. Laura smiled warmly. "I know you will." As Jason stood there, holding the flower in his hand, he realized that this was only the beginning. There were still so many things he needed to learn, so many things he needed to understand. But one thing was certain: he wasn't going to face it alone. As the days passed, Jason grew more and more curious about his abilities. At first, it had been exciting. He was amazed at what he could do, creating small objects like flowers and simple trinkets just by thinking about them. But now, the excitement was turning into something else, something darker. The more Jason practiced, the more he realized he had control over his thoughts. He could change things at will, bending reality to match his desires. Sometimes he would think about something small like a cup of coffee, and within seconds, it would appear in front of him. Other times, he would focus on more complex things, like moving objects or altering the way the world around him felt. He had never felt so powerful. But with power came temptation. Jason began to wonder if he could make anything happen with a simple thought. Why not use that power to make his life better? He had always wanted more excitement, more adventure, more of everything. One afternoon, he was walking through the marketplace when he saw something that caught his eye. A merchant was selling a small, sparkling gemstone. It was beautiful, almost too beautiful to be real. Jason felt a sudden urge to have it. Without thinking, he focused on it, imagining the gemstone in his hand. To his surprise, the gemstone appeared just as it had with the flower. He was holding it now, and it was even more dazzling than he had imagined. For a moment, Jason felt a rush of happiness. He had what he wanted, and it had come so easily. But then, something else crept into his mind. What else could he get? What else could he create? The possibilities seemed endless. And for the first time, Jason felt a dangerous thrill. He didn't need to work for anything anymore. He could just think it into existence. Later that evening, Jason sat alone in his room, the gemstone resting on the table before him. He stared at it, turning it over and over in his hands. He felt guilty, but there was no denying the excitement it brought him. He had wanted it, and he had made it happen. Wasn't that what he had always wanted? To have control over his own life? But as the night went on, Jason's guilt grew. He had always known that getting things this way wasn't right. It felt wrong. He hadn't earned the gemstone. It hadn't come through his own hard work or effort. It had come because he had wished for it, and that made him feel empty, as if the joy wasn't real. Suddenly, the gemstone felt heavy in his hand, as if it were reminding him that it wasn't just a simple treasure. It was a symbol of the temptation he was facing. His thoughts turned to Laura. She had warned him about the dangers of using his power recklessly. She had told him that this gift could be both a blessing and a curse, depending on how he chose to use it. Jason hadn't wanted to listen to her at first. It had all seemed too easy. But now, he wasn't so sure. Was he already losing himself to it? Jason put the gemstone down and closed his eyes. He thought back to the first time he had used his power, when the flower appeared in his hand. That had felt pure. It had felt right. But now, every thought seemed like a door opening to something else, something bigger and more dangerous. He couldn't help but wonder if he had gone too far. The next day, Jason met Laura again. She could see the concern on his face the moment she saw him. Without saying a word, she simply sat beside him, waiting for him to speak. "I've been thinking," Jason said, his voice unsure, "about the power, about what I can do." Laura listened carefully, sensing his inner turmoil. "What's on your mind?" she asked softly. "I've been creating things, small things, mostly," Jason said, his voice trailing off. "But I don't know, like it's not enough, like I want more. I could have anything. I could make anything happen." Laura looked at him with understanding. "That's the temptation," she said. "The more you use the power, the more it calls to you. It becomes harder to resist." "I don't know if I can handle it," Jason admitted, his voice filled with doubt. "I don't want to become greedy." Laura nodded. "It's not greed. It's the desire for control. But remember, Jason, control over things doesn't always mean control over yourself." Jason took a deep breath. "I'm scared that I'll start using it for the wrong reasons. That I'll forget what really matters." "You won't," Laura said gently. "You're already aware of it. That's the first step. You just have to keep your heart in the right place." Jason wasn't sure if he believed her, but he wanted to. He wanted to believe that he could use this power wisely. He didn't want to become someone who took things without thinking. But the temptation was real. It was always there, just beneath the surface, waiting for him to give in. For the rest of the day, Jason tried to focus on other things, on living his life without relying on his abilities. But it wasn't easy. Everywhere he looked, he saw things he could create, things he could change. It felt like he was walking in a world of infinite possibilities, but also in a world where everything was too easy, where nothing felt earned. That evening, he stood in front of his mirror and stared at his reflection. He had the power to shape the world around him. But what kind of person would he be if he kept using it? Could he still be someone real? Someone who earned what he had? As Jason stood there, lost in thought, a small voice in his mind whispered, "You can make anything happen, anything at all." But Jason knew that wasn't the answer. He couldn't keep living in a world where everything was just a thought away. He needed to find a way to use his power if he was going to use it at all. That didn't make him lose himself. Jason woke up the next morning with a sense of unease. The events of the past few days had left him feeling uncertain about his abilities. He had tried so hard to resist the temptation of using his power, but it was becoming harder and harder to ignore. It was like a voice in his head, whispering at all times, reminding him of what he could do. He could create anything he wanted, anything at all. The possibilities seemed endless, yet every time he used his abilities, a small part of him felt like he was losing something important. Something real. Jason hadn't spoken to Laura since their conversation about control, and he wasn't sure he could talk to her again. He didn't want to sound weak or scared. He wasn't a child, after all. He was supposed to be in control. But the power inside him felt more like a force he couldn't control, rather than something he could use for good. As he walked through the marketplace, Jason noticed the way people looked at him. He had started to realize that the world around him had changed. The power he had over it had made everything feel different, almost too easy. When he thought about something, it appeared. When he wished for something, it was there. The world felt like it was bending to his will, and that scared him more than anything. He stopped at a small food stall, looking at the fruit displayed there. A fleeting thought crossed his mind. I could have all the fruit I want, without paying for it. The thought alone made the fruit in front of him shimmer for a second. He quickly pushed the thought away, trying not to let the temptation win. But it wasn't just about the fruit. It was everything. Jason had the power to shape the world around him, to make anything happen. It was a heady feeling, one that made him question his place in it all. His mind wandered to the gemstone he had taken the other day, the one he had simply wanted and made appear. He hadn't worked for it. It hadn't come from any effort or struggle. It had come from a thought, a simple, fleeting thought, and that made it feel empty. Jason wasn't sure if he wanted to keep going down this path. The power was too tempting, too easy to fall into. If he could have anything, what would be left for him to work toward? The things he had always dreamed of: adventure, excitement, success were now within his reach, but they didn't feel the way he imagined they would. They felt hollow. Later that day, Jason decided he needed a break. He needed to think clearly, away from the distractions of his powers. He walked to a quiet park in the colony, hoping the fresh air would help clear his mind. The trees were tall, their leaves shimmering in the sunlight. It was peaceful here, far from the noise and confusion of the marketplace. Jason sat on a bench and closed his eyes, trying to quiet his thoughts. But even in the silence, his mind kept racing. He couldn't stop thinking about the power inside him. It was always there, a part of him now. But what was he supposed to do with it? How was he supposed to use it without losing himself? You're thinking too much, Jason. Jason's eyes snapped open, and he turned to see Laura standing nearby. Her expression was calm, but there was a hint of concern in her eyes. She had been watching him, waiting for him to reach out. I'm trying to figure things out, Jason said, his voice strained. But it's hard. I'm scared of what I might become. Every time I use it, I feel like I'm losing a part of myself. Laura sat down beside him, her presence soothing. I understand, she said quietly. The power is tempting, but it's not about the things you can create. It's about what you choose to do with it. Jason shook his head. But what if I can't control it? What if I end up using it for selfish reasons? What if I just take things for the sake of taking them? Laura nodded, her eyes thoughtful. That's the struggle. But you can't be afraid of what you might become. You have to decide who you want to be, and use the power to help you become that person. Jason looked at her, still unsure. But what if I get lost? What if I start changing the world around me for the wrong reasons? You already know the answer, Jason, Laura said, her voice soft but firm. You have the ability to shape your world, but you don't have to shape it alone. You have to decide what kind of world you want to create and what kind of person you want to be in. Jason let her words sink in. He had always wanted control, but now he realized it wasn't about controlling the world around him. It was about controlling himself. It wasn't the power that mattered, it was how he used it. He took a deep breath, trying to calm his mind. I don't want to lose myself to this. I don't want to become someone who takes whatever he wants. Laura smiled, her eyes gentle. You're not alone, Jason. You don't have to face this struggle by yourself. You just have to trust yourself and trust that you can make the right choices. For the first time in days, Jason felt a sense of peace. The weight of the power was still there, but now it felt less like a burden and more like a tool he could choose to use. It wasn't about controlling everything around him, it was about using the power wisely. With intention. Jason looked at Laura, his heart lighter. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I think I understand now. It's not about having everything. It's about making the right choices." Laura smiled warmly. "Exactly. And you're already on the right path." As Jason stood up, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't going to let the power consume him. He was going to use it for something greater than just himself. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, he felt ready to face it. Jason woke up early the next morning, his mind still heavy with thoughts of the power he held. After his conversation with Laura, something inside him had shifted. He no longer felt consumed by the temptation to control everything. But there was still one question that lingered in his mind. How far could he push this power before it changed who he was? He spent the morning walking through the park, taking in the fresh air. The trees were tall, their leaves rustling in the breeze. The peace around him was a sharp contrast to the storm inside his head. He had learned so much in the past few days: how to create things, how to manipulate the world with his thoughts. But none of it felt real. None of it felt earned. Every time he used his power, a part of him wondered if he was just pretending, creating illusions of what he wanted instead of living his real life. Jason sat down on a bench and closed his eyes, trying to push the doubts away. "I need to focus on what really matters," he told himself. But even as he thought those words, he knew he was lying to himself. What mattered? Was it the things he created with his mind? Or was it the things he worked for, the things that came from hard effort? "Jason," a voice broke through his thoughts. Jason looked up to see Laura standing in front of him, a calm smile on her face. "You look lost in thought," she said, sitting down beside him. Jason sighed. "I've been thinking about all this, the power. I thought it would be exciting to have control over everything, but now I'm not sure. It feels like I'm living in an illusion. Nothing seems real anymore." Laura listened quietly, her expression thoughtful. "I understand. When you first discover your power, it feels like the world opens up and everything is possible. But there's a danger in that. The more you create, the less you experience." Jason looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" Laura smiled gently. "You're creating an illusion of the life you want, instead of living the life that's actually yours. It's easy to get lost in the fantasy, but real life comes with challenges, struggles, and growth. That's what makes it meaningful." Jason's brow furrowed. "But isn't this power meant to help us, to make our lives better?" "Of course," Laura said. "But using your power to create a life that's perfect all the time doesn't teach you anything. It just gives you what you want without any effort. And the more you do it, the more you lose sight of what's real." Jason looked down at his hands, thinking about all the things he had created with a single thought. He had made flowers, objects, even moments in time, but none of it felt like it had meaning. It had just appeared, as if by magic. "I never thought of it that way," Jason admitted, his voice soft. "I've been so focused on using the power to get what I want that I forgot what it means to really live, to work for something, to face challenges and grow." Laura nodded. "That's the key. Life isn't about making everything easy. It's about finding value in the struggles, in the things you earn, and in the relationships you build." Jason stood up, feeling a weight lifting off his chest. "I think I understand now. I don't want to live in an illusion anymore. I want to live a real life, one where I grow and learn. I don't need to create everything I want, I need to earn it." Laura smiled at him. "Exactly. And that's the first step. You're not alone in this journey, Jason. You don't have to do everything by yourself." Jason felt a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't sure how to let go of the power completely, but he knew he didn't need to use it all the time. He could still create, but only when it was necessary, not just for his own gain, but for something greater. The next few days were different for Jason. He focused on his work, on the things he could do without relying on his powers. He spent time with friends and made new connections, realizing that the true joy in life came from the people he shared it with, not from the things he created out of thin air. But even as he embraced this new way of thinking, Jason couldn't fully let go of his powers. There were moments when he would feel the urge to create something, to make life easier, and sometimes he would give in. But each time, it felt less satisfying. The more he relied on his abilities, the more he felt disconnected from the world around him. One evening, Jason sat down at a table in the marketplace, looking out at the crowd. He felt a small twinge of temptation as he thought about creating a perfect meal for himself, something delicious and effortless. But instead, he let the thought go, choosing to enjoy the simple meal he had ordered from a nearby vendor. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. As he ate, Jason realized that the more he chose to live in the real world, the more he appreciated the small moments, the taste of food, the laughter of friends, the beauty of the world around him. These were the things that made life worth living, not the things he could create with his mind. And for the first time in a long time, Jason felt truly at peace.